anteriorly, superiorly, medial, laterally, and I don't want you to get lost when we're talking about this. So guys, I'm going to take you to the next. Yo, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So it's been long I actually made an anatomy video, so today you're going to be seeing an anatomical video. So when we talk about anatomical directional terms, these are terms that are used to describe the position and the relation to various structures of the body. These directional terms, they will be helpful along the line when we'll be talking about different anatomical structures, organs, ligaments, and all those stuff. So if you watch this video, it will be very easy for you to grasp other videos when I start talking about anteriorly, posteriorly, and all those stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to go straight to these anatomical directional terms. The front view of this model is the anterior view. This is my anterior view. You looking at me, this is the anterior view. So if I turn, the back part, as the back view, is the posterior view. This is the anterior view, and this is the posterior view. So an example where we can use this anterior and posterior is when we talk about any structure in the body. Now, a way for you to relate the structures, you can say the trachea is anterior to the esophagus. The esophagus is posterior to the trachea, just in way of relating who is in front and who is behind. So that's it. Another one is medial and lateral. So medial is close to the center, the midline of the body, while lateral is away from the body. So from here, this is my lateral view, and close to the middle part is the medial view. So what do we mean when we talk about superior and inferior? Superior is above, just like normal English, superior above, while inferior is beneath. So if I should cut this section, this is the superior. Don't worry, we're going to explain more about planes when we get there. So this is the superior view, and this will be the inferior view if I had a cut of this section. And if I still cut this section and I have this left, this will be the superior view, and that will be the inferior view towards my leg. You get it? Now in anatomy, towards my leg is the caudal view, while towards the head is the cranial view. That's another anatomical directional term, caudal and cranial. Caudal is towards the tail region, while cranial is towards the head region. Now what do we mean when we talk about external and internal? External, still like normal English, external is like the outer part of the body, where we talk about histology of a particular structure. We talk about the external view and the internal view. So external is like the outer part of the body, internal like the inner part of the body. Now to another directional term is superficial and deep. Superficial is like close to the body, like the skin is superficial, while the deep part is like the innermost part of it. And we talk about superficial and deep often when we talk about muscles. So you talk about a superficial muscle and a deep muscle. For example, the external oblique muscle is superficial to the internal oblique muscle. That means external oblique is outside, then internal oblique is inside. So that's about superficial and deep. I've also talked about external and internal. I've also talked about the anterior view and the posterior view. That reminds me, some authorities would prefer to use ventral and dorsal. Now when using ventral is like the anterior view, then dorsal is like the posterior view. You get it? So we've talked about anterior, posterior, we've talked about superiorly, inferiorly, external, internal, we've talked about superficial, we've talked about deep, we've talked about cranial and caudal. So those are the basic anatomical directional terms. So along the line, while discussing some anatomical topics, you'll be hearing some of all the stuff, anteriorly, superiorly, medial, laterally. So you'll be hearing some of all the stuff, and I don't want you to get lost when we're talking about this. So guys, I'm going to take you to the next phase of this tutorial video. That's anatomical planes. So what about anatomical planes? Anatomical planes are lines used to divide the body into different segments. And what's the significance of this anatomical plane? The significance of anatomical plane is that it allows the reader, the teacher, the student to understand what a model is trying to show or teach. So that's the significance of the anatomical planes, and we have 3 anatomical planes. So firstly, we're going to be talking about the transverse plane. The transverse plane divides the human body into superior and inferior. Remember what superior and inferior is. Superior is what? The upper part, while inferior is like beneath. So if we come back, this is our model. If we should put a line across, this is a transverse line, dividing this human being into the superior and the inferior view. You get it? Now, another plane is the coronal plane. What does the coronal plane divide the body into? The coronal plane divides the body into anterior and posterior. Can you remember anterior and posterior when we're talking about the anatomical directional terms? Now, if I have a plane cutting like this, it divides the body into the anterior and the posterior. So a cut like this would divide the body into this anterior view and the posterior view. That's about coronal plane. Now, the last plane is the sagittal plane. What does the sagittal plane divide the body into? The sagittal plane divides the body into left and right. That's two halves. And what do you think, which line do you think if I pass across it will divide the body into the left and the right? Of course, if I cut like this, we'll have the left side and this way the right side. So these are the three planes in anatomy. For short, I came up with a mnemonics, CTS, that's for the planes. Then AP is looking right. So A is anterior, P posterior. So the coronal plane divides to anterior and posterior. Then T is the transverse plane. I is into inferior and superior. S superior. Then S, that's the sagittal plane, is dividing the body into the left and the right. So that's about plane. So about the anatomical movement, I'm going to be sitting down and standing to illustrate the movement of the body. Now, when we're talking about anatomical movement, this has to do with the changes of the position of the body around the central axis, but in an anatomical plane. That's one anatomical plane. Medical students usually confuse these two words, abduction and adduction. So a way for you to remember this is take it like ADD, addition, you're adding something. So adduction, the addition, is like you're adding something towards your body. So abduction, ABD, away from your body, then adduction, ADD, adding it to your body. So that's a way for medical students to recall abduction and adduction. The next we're going to be revealing, you can also do, lest I forget, you can also do this adduction and adduction with your knees taking away from the body and bringing it close. So the next movement we're going to be seeing is medial rotation and lateral rotation. So some persons refer to medial rotation as internal rotation, while some other authorities refer to lateral rotation as external rotation. So whichever you want to use, you're all in the right track, so long as you are okay with the movement that is involved. You can do this with me. If you stand, putting your foot in anatomical position, don't worry, we'll talk more about anatomical position. So if you're standing like this and your foot goes away from the midline, that's lateral rotation. But if your foot is going towards the midline, that's medial rotation. You get it? Now the next one is flexion and extension. So why flexion has to do with the decrease in the angle between two joints, extension has to do with the increase in that angle. We're flexing our elbow and we're extending it. Decreasing, increasing the angle. This flexion and extension, it can still be confusing. You don't mix flexion with flexing. I don't know if you get it. When you're flexing your biceps, you're actually doing elbow flexion. But when you're flexing your quadricep muscle, you are extending the knee. So you don't confuse flexion from flexing. Do you get it? So, got it. So it's a bit confusing. So the best way to know it is wherever you're decreasing an angle, you're flexing. When you're increasing, you're extending. Do you get it? So that's about flexion and extension. The next anatomical movement is pronation and supination. Some radiographers often use this one, but it's also an anatomical movement term. Now, what is pronation? Pronation and supination. Now, this is a way I use in remembering supination and pronation. Supination, like I'm asking for something. This is a supine position, facing upwards, while pronation is the other way around. You get it? So you guys, when we talk about anatomical position, we mean standing upright, feet forwards, arms by your sides, in a supine position, heads neutral, facing forward, and that's the anatomical position. So you guys, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you in medical school or studying a health related course found this video helpful. We went as far as discussing the anatomical directional terms, the anatomical planes, where we said there are 3. We talked about the anatomical movements, the abduction, adduction, and we got out mnemonics for you to recall. And we also talked about the anatomical position. This video will be helpful, or the lessons from this video will be helpful for you to assimilate other videos we're going to be doing on this channel. So do well to keep playing it and get part of it. I know you just got into medical school and you're kind of, what's this? Anatomy is that easy. So you guys, that brings us to the end of this video. Anticipate more of anatomical videos, but we will not be happy if you've not subscribed to our channel. Hit the red subscribe button, share this video to your friends, because we're going to be dropping so many anatomical content along with other lifestyle vlogs. Thank you. Goodbye.